We are officially in Unit 7 if you're following along in your book, and we are jumping into what is now the next 25% of your class, starting with 50% slides. Broker relationships is our topic. We're going to start talking about a lot of really important stuff. Yeah, I'll just say important stuff. Also a little bit challenging at times, but very important stuff we really need to know. First and foremost, and one of the most important topics of your career and of this class, and probably one of the most tested, is agency. And so we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about agency. So I know some of you are worried about our pretest, maybe getting a little ahead of those. We slow down in areas like this because this is very, very highly tested. So agency has a lot of confusion. And the reasoning is because there's a lot of degrees of agency and agency relationships, and who do you work for, and who can you work for, and what can you do when you work for said people, or if you don't work for anyone, what does that look like? So we have to kind of look at all of those scenarios and how we apply our practice to each one. So this is a quick overview of some of the topics we're about to discuss. We're going to spend a fair amount of time going over this. So I want to take a minute here and just kind of pause for a second, because I want to give you a history lesson. So up until about 1993, every real estate broker worked for the seller. You were the listing agent, the end. If it wasn't your listing, you still worked for the seller. Everybody worked for the seller. So the seller paid the commission. It makes sense that everybody worked for the seller, right? Until up about, I think it was Wisconsin, they had a class action lawsuit or some sort of lawsuit where a buyer, a consumer, had been conversing with the agent, who we now know works for the seller, but they didn't think that. They thought that that particular agent worked for them and that they were helping them buy a house. When in fact, everything that they told that agent was being told to the seller. Because who do they work for? The seller. So after that was basically affirmed in court, the state there and the state pretty much everywhere developed some version of buyer agency in the capacity we know it now. So prior to 1993, if you were a real estate agent, you were coaching the sellers. That was your client. If you weren't coaching and helping a seller, you were not getting paid. So later we realized that, hey, the buyers also need someone to coach them. They need what we call buyer agency. So now, in the world that you live in currently, and that was kind of evolved from that transaction or that lawsuit, buyer agency exists in the sense that you, as the consumer purchasing a property, are able to engage a real estate broker to guide you through the purchase side. So now, historically, everybody worked for the seller, and then in the 90s we have buyer agency, and now the buyers get a coach. So buyers have a coach, sellers have a coach. It's fair, right? So if I'm keeping with the sports analogy, the sellers always have had the coach, and now the buyers have a coach. Who's the only other person allowed on the field?
Coach
The who?
Referee.
The referee, right? The referee's the only one that's supposed to be on the field, and they might get kicked off otherwise. Mm-hmm. So the referee, can they go tell the defense, hey, you need to back up because they're going to be throwing a deep ball?
No.
They can't hear that. Ref's on the field, he can't tell, hey guys, the safeties need to push back, quarterback's going deep. Can't do that. He has to call a fair game. Does he have to enforce the rules?
Yes.
Does he have to know all the rules?
Yes.
And he has to enforce them and call a fair game. He cannot coach anyone. That's called the dual agent. So you have the seller's agent coaches just the seller. We have the buyer's agent coaching just the buyer. There is an occasion where I might be the listing agent for the seller and the buyer wants me to represent them as well. I am now a dual agent. The dual agent operates as a referee. I can't tell you what to offer. I can't tell you what to take. I can't tell you how best to negotiate. I can't tell you how to counter. This is the true referee. What do you want to do? Okay, what do you want to do? Heads or tails? You want to kick first? You want to receive? That's all I get to do in this dual agent. Does that sound like anybody's getting coached?
No.
Dual agency gets a bad reputation for that reason. How can I be a coach when, as a referee, I legally cannot coach you? If I know you'll take 150, I can't tell them they'll take 150. If I know you'll pay more, I can't tell them you'll pay more. I can't say anything. I have to keep my mouth shut.
Isn't it, I mean, you can't give them a disadvantage or an advantage, but you still have to play by the rules, so
I
you're
have to
still
play
an
by the
advisor to both parties, right?
That's the thing. Am I?
No.
I'm a
You're an advisor.
referee. I can't actually coach them. I might be like, oh, that's a
You're
good
just
idea,
enforcing
but I
the
can't
rules.
tell you that's a bad idea.
You're basically just making sure everybody follows the rules.
That's my
Fills
goal.
out paperwork, right, basically.
Yep, I make sure the paperwork's filled out, I'm making sure the laws are followed, that the disclosures are done, everybody's informed to the
That's what I was
statutes,
talking
the
about,
disclosure part.
disclosure
Yeah.
and the law, yeah.
And we'll
that
talk
part.
about that, because
Yeah.
everybody gets disclosure, right? And so we'll talk about that. Now, as you can imagine, if I only get to work with the buyer or only get to work with the seller, do I get paid as much?
That was my question.
Yeah, right? I want to get paid more. So dual agents typically will get both commissions, which is also another reason it gets a bad rep. Because they're like, wait a minute, you're getting paid all the commission and coaching no one? We might have a problem here. So North Carolina, just North Carolina, came up with an alternative for this. So if you read any of the newspapers or if you're following your real estate industry news, there's a big push to get rid of dual agency. We don't love this. Let's just get rid of dual agency. And the firms are saying, wait. We like money. Let's not just be hasty. So, and North Carolina says, we know you like money and we know we like rules. So what can we do to fix this? And North Carolina came up with a thing called designated dual agency. Because remember, the buyer agreement is with the firm, the listing agreement is with the firm, so the dual agent is the firm. Make sense? So what designated dual agent does is say you're with the firm and you're with the firm. Do you know anything about the buyer? Say no.
No.
Do you know anything about the seller? Say no. Great. You're going to be the seller coach, you're going to be the buyer coach, y'all coach respectively. So that you are still dual agents under the same firm. All the money still comes to the same firm, but each client gets a coach that can coach them.
And they don't talk to each other.
And they don't talk to each other. They have to not know anything about the other party. So they would be no different than if you worked at a firm and you worked at a firm coaching your respective clients. If you know anything that you're not supposed to, you can't represent this buyer and give it back. I, as broker in charge, have to designate someone else. You see how that works?
But the agents are still under the same firm.
The agents are still under the same firm, and to be very precise, you can never have dual agency with more than one firm, because it's always one firm. You can have dual agency with one agent. You cannot have designated agent with less than two agents. Always going to be two people coaching. So you always get, again, the intention of designated dual agency is to restore the coaching. Dual agency is just a referee. That's not fair. I mean, it is fair, but it's not really helping anybody. My goal is to be fair, but I can't do what I do best. I can't coach. So you coach, and everybody gets a coach, and we've accomplished our goal here. Yes, sir.
In practice, what is the most common, the designated in North Carolina, just to avoid conflicts of interest?
So to be most common, I will be frank with this class and tell you that most practicing brokers don't know the difference between dual and designated. The goal is that designated would be the most likely practice. I will tell you I believe in dual agency as well in certain circumstances. For example, what if she's a builder and she says the price is $169.9, here's what I'm doing. And they're a buyer and they say, will you negotiate? And they say no. Can I competently put that deal together? What's the price? $169.9, here's the paperwork. Here's the inspections. What inspections you're going to get, here's what they found. Your builder warranty is going to cover it, right? Yep. Do I really have to coach anybody in that capacity? No. Builder has their systems. I'm just helping them follow. Buyer just needs a guide, right? So in that capacity, the referee might actually be a good fit. Might not. And that's why we created designated agency, because we want, if there really is a lot of negotiations and coaching going on, you need coaches. But if it's just a, here's what we want done, or sometimes you'll get the call from a for sale by owner. Hey, this person called on our sign. We've already negotiated terms. Can you write it up? Okay, let me see what I can do. Let me sort through this and make sure everything's legal. And can I be a dual agency in that capacity?
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's a case by case.
It should be a case by case. And actually it is a case by case. And ultimately I will tell you, every firm has a policy on this. And every firm's policy should be that we practice dual, or we practice dual and designated. And if they're going to designate, they need a policy as to how. I just gave you an example of how I just did it. Assuming I'm the broker in charge, I designated that. They need a policy that says who in the firm can designate, and what does that look like. That gets a little more in-depth with the whole designated practice than in this pre-license class than you will in your post-license class. But I will not put any way, shape, or form a period on the end of that, because agency and dual agency will be a running topic through all of your career and all of your classes. And it's highly tested, specifically designated in dual.
As a percent to total sales, is that in the minority, or do you see more of it? Or, I mean, it sounds like people would be afraid of it, at least initially.
So it depends,
Because
honestly.
it's not as clear as either being the buyer's agent or the seller's agent.
And his question is, do we see a lot of it? And the answer to your question is, it depends on the firm. If I have a firm that has 5 agents, I'm probably not seeing a lot of dual agency. If I have a firm that has 150 agents, probably going to see a lot of dual agency. This firm has 150 agents, of which many are listing agents and many are buyer's agents, and so a lot of times they are. But they're usually in a designated format.
But isn't that usually by accident though, not because the buyer didn't want to have their own agent or whatever, right? Or how?
Correct, yeah, he says usually by accident. And that is the case, because here's the situation. You want to come buy a house, and hey Steve, we want to buy a house, come talk to me. Great, here's what I'm looking for. Do I know what firm is going to have that house listed? So, but at the onset of our conversation, we have to have the worker real estate agent conversation that says, this is how that works. Do you want me to be your buyer's agent? If my firm has a listing that you like, and you want me to show it to you and be your referee on that, or be your coach on that, then we're going to talk about this dual agency situation. And so it's always good to have the conversation. Some folks will say, hey, you know what? I'm not comfortable with dual. Great. We just won't look at any of my firm's listings right now. And we're actually going to talk about it, because we might have to change our mind along the way, and there's processes for that.
So what about the inverse? You have just, Joe, potential home buyer, just calls the number on the sign.
Actually, now it used to be
And you
more
just
often
sell
than
agent.
not. Yeah, so great question, and this was probably up until the onset of the internet, the #1 source of business for real estate brokers was their sign. Because consumers say, hey, I want to know about that house, and there's a phone number in the yard. And they would call that phone number. And it did usually revert to the listing agent, which is also part of why that case came up, because again, prior to the 90s, the listing agent worked for everybody. So that's what we wanted. We wanted to call and sell it. If a consumer is calling a sign, which is a point of education that you will share with your folks, you're calling the listing agent. They don't work for you.
Yeah.
And here's the rule of thumb.
Get your own agent or understand the risk.
Exactly. And this is a rule that you can write down, put this in your memory bank. Every agent works for the seller until you don't. What do I mean by that?
So it means that everybody that does look for the house and they have the part of like the final sale, we have a play in like in their hand in the pocket and start getting commission.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Partly. So here's what I mean by that is that every broker historically worked for the seller, right? Still that is the case. Everybody either works for the seller or is the seller's sub-agent until they don't.
Which means you've entered into a buyer's agency agreement with an individual.
Right. If you hear what he said?
Express written agreement.
If I don't have a buyer agency agreement, who do I work for?
So,
Everybody works for the seller until you don't. Now, when you start working with buyers, we have to have the conversation that maybe I am a dual, maybe I work for both, maybe I'm designated, but you're not going to be anything other than the listing agent until you're not. Does that make sense? And this part right here tends to confuse folks too. Sub-agent of the seller. What do you think that means?
I don't have time. I'm going to refer it to somebody in my firm.
Yeah, so it's if every listing goes with the firm. So let's say everybody in this room is a real estate firm and I list the property. I'm the agent, I go on the appointment. Guess whose listing it also is? Everybody in this room. It's the firm's listing. So you are all automatically a sub-agent of the seller. So while I was the agent who signed the paperwork, you're all sub-agents of that seller.
If you're the main agent and you pass away, it goes on to one of the sub-agents.
Correct, yeah, so and we'll talk about the agency agreements and the inheritability of that, absolutely. One thing I will comment on this too is with the seller sub-agent, it's not always under the same firm. Ready for your mind to be blown?
Oh.
Blow it right here, ready? So we're all sub-agents of the seller because we're at the same firm. What if we split the room? And this is my firm over here. We're all sub-agents of the seller, right? We listed it, we're sub-agents of the seller. Y'all are a different firm. Different firm. Buyer calls you. She's like, great, You want me to be your buyer's agent? They say no. But will you show me the house? Can she show that house?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure can. Is she working for the buyer?
No.
Who do you work for if you don't work for the buyer?
Seller.
Seller sub-agent. So you can even be a seller sub-agent from a different firm, because until you work for the buyer, you don't.
There should be some phone calls before that happens.
But to work for the buyer, you have to have a contract.
Yeah, so in order to create this agency agreement, you have to have an agreement. And we're going to talk about the different types of agreement. And each one of these is a little bit different, because we have a buyer agency agreement, we have a listing agreement, exclusive right to sell listing agreement, which we practice. And then on each of them, it talks about this option of designated agency. Hey, Mr. Seller, does the seller have to authorize? What if they don't want anybody from a firm to show? Y'all got my price tag on your wall. I don't want nobody over here selling it. They can say, I don't want that dual thing. I don't want it. Somebody else can sell it. That's in their agreement. Over here, same thing. They have to authorize us to be dual agents. Until you have authorization to be dual agents, you can't be a dual agent. And designated agents ain't a thing, because you can't get to designated until you've gotten through here. Did it blow your mind? Good. That was the intent. So that's believe it or not, is the high level view. Now let's break it down a little more. All right. So agency in a nutshell says who do you represent in a transaction? So who is your client and what can you do depends on your agency agreement. Simply put, your agency agreement is your employment contract. If you don't have an agency agreement of some kind, you don't have a job. We need somebody to agree that they like you and want you to work for them. Therefore, you can enter into an agency agreement and they will agree to compensate you, because our compensation is in the agency agreement. I know I always get people's attention when I start talking money. They're like, wait a minute, we can pay for this? If you do it right. So let's talk fiduciary. Keep it clean. Keep it clean. Fiduciaries are, by default, simply put, a way of saying, by the way, this is a non-real estate specific term, it transcends. Fiduciary just means you have to put your client's interests above your own. That's really what it means. Lawyers have fiduciary relationships. They can't be like, I should throw this guy on the bus, I get a paycheck. Even if they don't like you, they have to put your needs above your own. They may know you slice and dice grandma and they still have to defend you, because they have to put your interests above their own. Fiduciary, we have to always be watching out for our clients. So putting the needs of your clients above your own. By the way, this will come up. There will be times where you're having like, should I do that? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? What if I say this? If I tell them about that underground storage tank, what if they walk away? What if I don't get paid on this deal? Sorry. It's going to happen. And that's how you know you've made it too, by the way. When you're comfortable enough to coach your clients and say, listen, we may have to walk away from this deal because this is a situation you may not be comfortable with. We need to investigate it, and if you're not comfortable moving forward, I'm not comfortable moving forward. It means I don't get paid, sure, but it means you're not buying a house with problems. If you're not comfortable, I'm not comfortable. Always watching out for them. And do you think that makes your clients respect you more?
Yes.
You would hope so.
Sure do. And by the way, who are they going to send you then?
Other
All their friends and families to take one deal and turn it into a bunch of deals because you have a good reputation.
And they might help you if they're selling their house. They might help you could be their buyer agent for the next house they want.
Exactly, and then
And
it's
kids,
long-term
they grow up.
relationships and sell their kids and their grandkids, and hopefully you can live that long. The other thing I will tell you that the opposite of that, that's the relationship, that's doing the right thing. The opposite of that is when you're shoving a house down someone's throat, you're selling it to them. When you're selling it, people can smell it. It's called commission breath.
So treat this as a service business or else you're not going to make it.
You got it. This is not a sales business. This is a service industry. People are paying for your service. It's customer service, it's your knowledge, it's your expertise. This is not a sales thing. It is a sales business because you don't get paid until it sells, but we are not pushing things down people's throat. You are a guide, you're a consultant. That's what you signed up for. So, how do you show a property, or would you show a property that pays more commission over another? The answer is no. Answer is no. By the way, this will come up. Your clients will say, I want to see this house, and this house. They don't all pay the same, people. There's no standard commissions. We've had this conversation. There are limited services. There are a lot. There's for sale by owners. What if your client wants to see a for sale by owner and they're not even offering to pay you? You're like, sorry, we can't see that. We're not looking at that house. You still show them. You go to the for sale by owner and you have a conversation about compensation. By the way, in the buyer agency agreement, it says that we'll first seek our payment from the seller. We're going to try. If they don't, Mr. Buyer, just know that you need to pay me. So you can still get paid. You just got to have the right conversations. The really easy conversations, you want to look at that for sale by owner, it's listed at $100,000, no problem. Mr. For sale by owner, are you offering compensation? No, no problem. Instead of offering you $100,000, we're going to offer you $105,000 to cover my fees. And so $5,000 of that $100 pays my commission. See what I did there? Everybody wins.
That's called something. It's 10%, like we just want a certain amount, you can keep the commission, I mean, keep whatever you sell over there.
So, yeah, you're thinking of a net listing?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are really, really frowned upon. We'll talk about those later on.
What is that called? The one?
So what he's referencing is a net commission. There's such thing as a net listing agreement that says no matter if I sell it for 100, everything above 100 I get to keep. The reason they're extremely frowned upon is because at that point you're not doing a fiduciary, because your client's needs are highest and best, getting the most amount of money, least amount of time. If I'm willing to be like, oh, you only got 50 and I got 75, cool for me. Who am I really looking out after?
Well, the discussion with the for sale by owner should be easy, because without you, they don't have anyone looking at the house right that minute. So does he want to keep trying to do it on his own with nobody coming, or bring you with some expertise and try to get the deal done?
You'd be surprised. Yes, sir.
How does that work for somebody like me?
What about you?
Well, as far as like, okay, I purchased a house for, 30, I flipped it for 70. Is that considered a breach of fiduciary duty?
You are your own client, right?
I mean, yes.
So you are watching out for your own interest.
Okay.
Yeah. You're a flipper, right? That's
Yeah.
that's what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your job is to get yourself the best deal to get yourself the most amount of money.
Yeah.
You're just double dipping. You're like multiple personality.
No. When
No,
I
you
asked,
said it was super frowned upon, so I guess it was more like.
So no, what he's referencing is the net listing, meaning you hire me and say, hey, Steven, I only need 100. Anything above 100, go for it. You can have whatever you sell. So in that capacity, it may be, and it is likely said that I would take advantage of you and I would get more money.
I got you.
It can be done. It's just really, it's
I guess I try to
dangerous.
see it like the same thing. but-
Yeah, it's really, because at what point am I looking at after you versus trying to look at after me?
Yeah.
but what is it called that you mentioned earlier about getting a higher price specifically for your commission? What's that called?
Negotiating. Yeah, I'm just negotiating.
And then how does it play out? Like, I've seen where they have like a decorating cost that's figured in. But so what do you have the
Well,
lawyer?
essentially the buyer's paying your commission at that point. It's just for a higher
Yeah, but
price
so
on the
how do
house,
they,
right?
how is it written
So
down?
all these things that we're discussing are negotiation and marketing.
Is
It's
it in
just-
the purchase, the agreement?
So none of the paperwork we talk about now, but when we go to write an offer to purchase and contract, we may plug in some of these things.
That would be where you would put it? Okay, that's all.
Yeah, we'll get there.
I can sleep tonight.
We'll get there. Yeah. And there's a lot of specific things like that we won't get into this class. But in post licensing, we have a lot of that because there are some unique situations that pop up in your day-to-day practice. Like, how do I do this? Where do I put this form? Doesn't have a place for that. Is there a form for that? And so there's little things like that we do get into, but they're not going to be tested in here. We want you to have a basic knowledge, and then we're going to build on it when we get out. All right, compensation. So payment of compensation or its source does not create the agency relationship. A contract or the actions of the parties create the relationship. Now, I want to comment on this a couple of times. First of all, in North Carolina, to be acting on behalf of someone as their broker, you have to have permission. The end. No implied agency in North Carolina. Now, what this portion means in this section here, and I'll harp on a contract or the actions of the parties creates a relationship. The actions here may create an implied agency somewhere besides North Carolina. We in North Carolina do not have implied agency. If you don't have an agency agreement, you don't have an agency agreement. The only gray area is with the buyer contract, where you can have an oral buyer agency, but it is an express Do you want me to be your buyer's agent? Yes. You want me to be your agent? Then yes. Cool, we've had that conversation. Do you, I do, you do, I do, express agreement. It still has to be reduced to writing at some point because we cannot have agency without an agency agreement. We'll get more into those.
But you would like, you just wanna get started, you can get started right at that point after you got the oral agreement.
Yeah, we've done the work on real estate brochure, and I've asked you, do you want me to now represent you as your buyer's agent? You say, great, we can go look at houses now.
You don't have to talk about commission and all that, do you, at some?
You should have and his question is in regards to compensation. You should have a conversation about compensation early and often. The reason that the buyer agency has a little leniency in it is because you don't always know what you're gonna get paid until you pick out the house. So now before we start making offers and before we do anything, I will have it reduced in writing so you know exactly what my fee is to represent you on the purchase of this property. And that's usually indicative of what's being offered by the listing agent. And so if the listing agent is offering 10% commission, I would amend put in my buyer agency agreement, I expect to get 5% or whatever I expect to get out of that. So compensation has to be disclosed before any offers are made.
Why would you agree on an oral? Is it just maybe they got one they want to go look at super fast, and I mean, just kind of convenience, friend, relationship building? I mean, is that real? It's just judgment call whether you do it or not, right?
Yep. It's his question is why would you ever do this oral buyer agency agreement? The answer is you shouldn't. And kind of like I said earlier, you always work for the seller until you don't. Which agency agreements have to be in writing? All of them, eventually. Because the buyer agency agreement has to be reduced to writing before we make an offer anyway. So why would we even operate under an oral buyer agency agreement? We just don't want to do the paperwork. We're just trying to build rapport, maybe, because paperwork does scare people, right? If you walked in here and like, hey, I need you to sign this paperwork before we talk, maybe that's gonna scare you. But that's why we have that work on real estate agent brochure, is to get that conversation started, make you aware that agency exists, and then if you like me, hire me to be your agent, and this is the contract where you're saying I do hire you to be my agent. And some people
only vet one agent, you said.
most people will only vet one agent. The buyer agency portion, and the reason that some people will do that more of an oral buyer agency is because you may show, you called me on a sign for 123 Main Street, and I may just go out and show it to you, and you say, hey, I've got an agent, I don't need an agent. Great, well, we don't need an agency agreement. Or I'm an attorney, I intend to represent myself. Well, great, well, we don't need an agency agreement. Or, hey, we're just starting to look. Thanks for showing us. Great. Well, I've got these others. Would you like to look at those? You are good. You know what? I like you. Why don't we work together? And much like us, we have a little bit of a fear commitment, right? And so it could be, I just don't like you. As a consumer, thanks, but no thanks. And so we move on. So just like the rest of us in this room, we might want to shop who your service provider is. And the agents get the inverse. We get to shop who our clients are going to be. You may not want to work with everybody that you come across. Trust me, you will not.
It's actually a good point because it got to be good for both parties.
It is. And that's why it has to be an express agreement. Both of us have to want this. If we don't want this, we don't have this. And trust me, it's easier to have this conversation earlier than it is later. We do not want adverse situations to pop up later. So that's why we have these agency agreements in place and spell out our compensation from the start. There is no implied agency in North Carolina. Now, here's what you'll need to memorize, and this is called your fiduciary duties. And when I said fiduciary earlier, fiduciary duties are detailed in North Carolina by these items. I like old cars, particularly Volkswagen Beetles, but this is just an acronym, your next acronym, to help you remember what the fiduciary requirements are. These are relevant, guys. I know it feels like you're memorizing, and you are, but you actually need these in your post-licensing, and you'll need them in practice. So we're going to start with obedience, then we're going to go to loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable skill and care. And that's how we get the old car. That probably didn't show up on your slide. Sorry. So when I
probably just say it was on purpose. It's good. Make us write it down.
Some of these I printed with a white text on a gray background, and when they got printed, they got inverted. So, which is good because it does make you write a few things, but you will not have to write everything. But this is important. So these are your old car acronym for your fiduciary responsibilities as a real estate broker. Now we're going to talk about each one of these because they're all very important. Everybody okay?
Mm-hmm.
So let's first start with following directions. You will always be, in the capacity of their agent, able to follow lawful instruction. And we'll talk a lot about this as we progress through your post-license classes and scenarios that pop up. Sometimes you will be asked to do things from your client that you know, that's not really the way this is supposed to go. As long as it's legal and they've told you to do it, you can. I'll give you an example. Offer to purchase has due diligence money, right? We've talked a little bit about due diligence money. Due diligence money goes to who?
Escrow.
Close.
I guess
The
it's-
seller. So it goes straight to the seller. But there's a earnest money too. It can be either. So let's say we have earnest money in escrow, and I've been given this money, right? I have to deliver it as a buyer's agent to the selling agent, right? Because we just had a contract. We formed a contract. I got to deliver these checks. I got to take them over there. But while I'm driving, the buyer said, hey, you know what? This is a dumb idea. I don't think I want to buy a house anyway. Can you bring me those checks back?
You're already on.
But we're under contract. You signed a contract. It says that they get this money. I know as an agent, it says they get this money. But you as my client said, bring it back. Well, what do I do?
Bring the money.
I gotta take it back.
It's
I gotta
not
take it
illegal
back.
to return your money.
Because it's not illegal to return money that is theirs. Now, did it breach the contract?
Possibly, yes.
Yes.
It might
And
be.
that seller is entitled to that due diligence money. We have a signed contract.
Yeah.
That's the rights of
Who's that contract between? What parties?
the seller.
Seller.
Buyer and the seller. Stephen's not on that contract. Buyer and seller can go to court over said monies. And at this point in time, Stephen is a mail person. I am delivering checks. When you call the mail person, they bring it back. And that's what I do. Because it's a lawful instruction. Even though in my head I know the seller's owed this money, I don't work for that seller, I work for that buyer. The buyer says, bring me my checks, I bring them their check.
But they're gonna lose it anyway,
But you would
because
just
breach of
want
contract,
to
right?
And her question is they're going to lose it anyway. To answer your question, maybe. I've had cases where it's gone both ways. It was a nominal amount of earnest or due diligence, maybe $500. The seller just said it's not worth me going to court over $500. So they just let them have their due diligence money back and sold it to somebody else because it was a hot market. If that was a $3,000 due diligence fee, seller might be like, we'll see you civil court. I want my money. And they can.
It's still not $30.
Hmm?
It's still not $30.
Still not sell you the house. Yeah, because they're owed the due diligence money whether you bought it or not.
Just because you signed the contract.
Because you signed the contract, says you would. So, that's lawful instructions. And this is a good example of a seller instructs you to discriminate against a minority group. Must you follow that instruction? And say no. No, it is never okay to follow illegal instructions. Discrimination's still illegal. Don't do it. Nothing's changed. Would you be entitled to get paid?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Possibly.
Here's the deal with earning a commission. You earn your commission when you do what you were hired to do. If you hire me to be your buyer's agent and we found the house that you wanted to buy and we got under contract, I have earned my commission. When do I get my commission?
When it sells.
When it sells.
Or when it just says you can.
When it closes and the check has cleared the bank. However, many deals don't always close, right? So while I may have earned it, I may not have received it. So the seller or the buyer may breach the contract. Hey, this contract is breached. We're not going to have a deal, right? So you remember my scenario with the little old couple that wanted to terminate, and they were like, hey, we have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
They had to terminate. We did compensatory damages. We set the buyer whole, all right? We made it go away. Did myself, as the listing agent, and the buyer agent earn a commission?
Yes.
Sure did. They had the house for sale. They listed it with me. Did I sell it to a buyer that with terms that the seller could agree to? Yes. Did the buyer hire their agent to find them a house to purchase with terms that they could agree to? Yes. We went under contract with the intention that we were going that direction until my sellers had to breach. Could myself and the buyer agent have sued the seller for our commission?
Yes.
Yes, we could have. But we didn't because they were little old ladies. It was like $100,000 house. We could have though. By the way, never a good idea to sue clients. We do have social media, just saying.
So did you get compensation or no?
No.
No, I did not. No, we ended up terminating, they still live there to this day. Yeah,
It
it's
just
my
wasn't
knowledge.
worth it.
Hmm?
It just wasn't worth it.
It's not worth it. Yeah, I mean, could I have sued and gotten $3,000 commission? Sure. Would it have cost me tons of possible reviews and negative comments and slanderous remarks all over the world? Probably. Could it have cost me 3 more deals? I mean, this is a $100,000 deal. What if it cost me a $500,000
What
deal?
would it cost your reputation?
It would cost your reputation. In this industry, your reputation is everything. So that is lawful instructions, and that is your next break before we get to. Actually, we got one more. If a seller directs you to reject an offer that is less than $200,000, must you follow that direction?
No.
So this is a good conversation in the sense that in North Carolina, the answer is no,
You have to present every offer,
because we have to present all offers,
in no order.
no matter what. In North Carolina, brokers present all offers. Doesn't matter if you're under contract, doesn't matter if it's $1, doesn't matter if it's cash, doesn't matter what this offer is. If someone makes an offer on a property you have listed, we have to present all offers. Even if the seller's like, Steven, stop, it's not 200, stop bringing them to me. Sorry, dude, I had to present all offers. National portion, you may, in written directive, be able to accept a letter from the seller that says, hey, if it's not 200 or more, don't bring it to my table, with written authorization. Not North Carolina, only national. See the difference?
Wait a minute, the written is not okay, still not okay in North Carolina?
Not okay in North Carolina, maybe national.
So this would be a no.
So the answer here is no for North Carolina, possibly for national. And we will talk about obedience and loyalty when you return from break.